Hello, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. You are listening to the Hebrew Bible Institute. Join with me today are Alex and Pastor Alex Bolotnikov, and we are currently on Lesson 13, The Images of the End. Now, Pastor, I want to kick us off by reading Revelation 16, verse 16. And there's a lot to unpack in this verse. And the verse starts off by saying, it goes like this: Then they gathered the kings together to the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. So my question to you is, who are the kings? Why are they gathered together? And what is Armageddon? Why is this so important?
Oh, yeah. Lots of different sermons you could hear about describing this Armageddon. I don't know. Apocalypse usually is kind of people recognize and think it's something terrible, right? If you say Armageddon, would people know what it is today?
I don't think so, no.
Because back in my days, they were talking about nuclear Armageddon. Some kind of, the climax of a nuclear war. Anyway, all kinds of things I've heard over the years about this, and especially today, among many Christians, there is this heightened attention to the war which is going on in Israel now, because some of the preachers I heard talk about, the Armageddon is coming. The Armageddon is coming. But before we make this conclusion and, start pulling from political news, let's pull from the Bible, and we need a context. And Revelation 16 is very, very important because it is talking about what happens right before the coming of Jesus. And this is basically like in the book of Revelation, you have this numbers, certain sevens, like 7 churches, letter to 7 churches. Then you got 7 seals. Then you got 7 trumpets. That's in the historical part of the book of Revelation. But this is not the historical. That's still in the future, and that's that's the 7 last plagues, or 7 bowls of God's wrath. Let's take a read, Revelation 16, verse 1 and 2.
Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the 7 angels, "Go, pour out the 7 bowls of God's wrath on the earth." The first angel went and poured out his bowl on the land, and ugly, festering sores broke out on the people who had the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. What is the mark of the beast? I know we went over it in last lesson. But
we went over
vaguely.
the second beast, and we haven't had a chance in the last lesson to actually talk about the mark. We read about this, but I think this gives us an opportunity. It just immediately shows the connection with Revelation 13, with 2 satanic agents, the papal Rome and the modern church state, which is prophesied about what the United States is going to be. And let's remind our listeners about this sign. It's right here in the book of Revelation 13, verse 16 and 17.
It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name.
So, on the right hand and on the forehead, have you ever, do you remember somewhere in the Old Testament they use this and this, the right hand and the forehead in some in the Old Testament? Do you recall? No. Let's remind ourselves. This is I know many people would see this for the very first time, but it's in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6. In fact, this is the main text, very popular when Jews recite it. So let's read Deuteronomy 6, verse 4 through 8.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Do you remember what a scribe once asked Jesus about the greatest commandment of all?
Yes.
And what did Jesus say?
Love the Lord your God.
Exactly. He recited from that. So, love the Lord your God. And then it says, let these words be in your heart. Teach them children. And then put them right here and right here. Why do you think it says here, tie them to your hand and let them be on your forehead? Why does it say it in the context?
I could vaguely think that with your hands, you're working, you're using your hands. So with whatever you do it for the glory of the Lord, and you keep that in your mind.
Yeah, keep in the mind. That's right. It's what is called mnemonics. Remember. So that's why I say, you teach it to the children. So from the childhood, people remember to love the Lord. Talk about this all the time. That's how you remember. So love the Lord your God. Okay. We talked last time, and I think you, Alex, mentioned that people often think it doesn't matter which day we're still going to be saved. And I always think about this. So, in fact, it was the question that my Baptist friend asked me point blank, because he heard me speak about Sabbath. He heard Mark Finley speak about Sabbath, because it was back a long time ago when Mark Finley was in Kiev. So he asked me, my brother, I love the Lord, you know that. So if I don't keep the Sabbath, and I know where he was coming from, because if you have relatives, and big families, I've known many good Christians, Baptists, Pentecostals, they have big families and big connections, and somebody goes like this against what they believe, it's basically very difficult, lose the whole family. And so I knew where he was coming from. So I knew he was sincere, but he was asking this: if I don't keep the Sabbath, will I be saved? What would you answer to this man?
I would say, yes, you will be saved. If you don't.
Okay, interesting answer, but if that's the case, why do we keep, what's the point of even keeping the Sabbath if it doesn't matter? You're still going to be saved.
And that's why last lesson we went over that, and it's more for yourself than for God. It doesn't benefit him if we do it, we're doing it for our own personal self and remembering him and what he's done for us.
Yes, that's a good idea. But there is also one interesting place here, one interesting statement of Jesus. Because, it took me a while to find a good answer to this question, because if I say don't, you are not going to be saved, then are we saved by Sabbath? And we're not.
No, we're saved by grace.
Exactly. But then if we're not saved by Sabbath, then why does it matter? Maybe I should just doesn't, if I'm offered a job and a good work on Sabbath, maybe it doesn't matter. I'll still be saved. I'll be just going to a different church, which is more convenient, But here's the text which stands out for me, and these are the words of Jesus, John 14:15.
If you love me, keep my commandments. Commands.
Yeah, commandments. Yeah, that's that. So in other words, if we know that Sabbath is not a ritual in the temple, then it's a commandment. So very simple. So, like if we take 10 commandments, right, the Decalogue, there shall not be any gods in front of me. Don't don't worship the image. Keep the name of the Lord holy. So these are 4 about the love of God. This is how we know that we're not doing the lip service.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how we know that we actually love Jesus. It's because we respect his authority.
So then that brings up the question, if we don't keep the commandments, then do we truly love God? And if we don't truly love God, are we saved?
The last statement, as I always recommend, not to elaborate, because God decides who is going to be saved. But we know 2 things. Number 1, the real test whether or not we love Jesus is whether we follow his commandments. And number 2, take a look at Revelation 14:12. This is the characteristic of people whom God considers as his own, as his saints.
This calls for patience, endurance on the part of the people of God who keep his commandments and remain faithful to Jesus.
So it takes both. It takes both. Keep the commandments and be faithful to Jesus. So it's always like...
You can't do one without the other.
Exactly. In Judaism, they're very keeping the commandments, but not accepting Jesus. Many Christians are faithful to Jesus, but they have a problem with the commandment. But God wants both. That's why when we talk about how Satan used deceptive power, he alters the memory. So we are to remember to love God. Mm-hmm. So if we love God, or if we love Jesus, we keep his commandments. That's very simple. The first commandment, that's what we put here and here. It's just, you shall love the Lord your God. Okay, but Lord, I love you, that's a declaration. When Jesus says, okay, if you really do, you keep my commandments. So that brings us to the point that this beast, whom we described, the characteristic, the church state of the last days, and we are seeing this type of conglomerate church is being formed. I am a witness of it because I've seen how it was in the 90s and what is it now. It is a bad manner today in the Christian circles to emphasize your denomination. That's why they're talking about the general, In fact, this is the characteristic of what is today going on. It's called Christian nation movement.
Mm-hmm.
Where Christian nation doesn't matter which denomination you come from, we're the same, and we follow the same non-biblical principles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of which is we say we are about Jesus, but we ignore his commandments. And that's non-biblical principle. And that's what is altered. So this is the deception. So those who have a mark of the beast, it says they're going to be, take a look at what happens to those who refuse to take it.
So before we move forward on that, just to get this out of the way, I just have a lot of, Christian friends, all different denominations. And for them, when you bring up mark of the beast, they're all thinking physical marks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember the whole microchip.
Yeah.
Yes. And now...
And then vaccinations.
And vaccinations and so on and so forth. But they never, take a step back and they're like, wait, it's symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of eye-opening for me too. And, I never saw it that way.
This is why when we read last lesson, we always go to the Old Testament.
100%.
The book of Revelation does not, think about John. He lived in the 1st century. Would he ever even understood? So you say to John, oh, this is a microchip. Would you think he would understand it?
No.
So John is using the language. God is telling him to use the language which is familiar to all the people of that time, and that's the language of the Old Testament. I don't know if you ever, the Bible mentions this. It's called phylacteries. You ever heard of them? I don't know if you've seen Orthodox Jews do it. They have this box here, and they tie it with a belt, and then they put it here, and they offer a prayer. So Pharisees had this back in the time of Jesus. This is called the phylacteries. Inside these boxes, you have a little scroll, literally micro handwritten scroll, with the words of, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and so forth. So this is how they do it, trying to make it literal. But the idea here in the book of Deuteronomy is not about literal, it's remembering. Mm-hmm. So basically, if I were to say these words in modern language, I wouldn't use mark on the forehead and the right hand, but I would say he would make you forget certain values and replace it with a fake values.
And so we can conclude with this insight that God has given his children a mark. Mm-hmm. And that is to keep his commandments, to love the Lord your God. And through Satan's deception, he has deceived many people with those commandments by placing his own mark. Mm-hmm. With that being said, your actions and your choices have consequences. Mm-hmm. And God's wrath is viewed in those consequences in Revelation 16 when it talks about the bowls or the 7 plagues of God's wrath. So I'd like for you to dive a little bit deeper into those 7 plagues and how that all ties in with Armageddon.
Yeah, that's very important because, first of all, when we see that the very first plague is poured and the people who carry the mark of the beast suffering is already very important. Let's go back to Revelation 13 There's one little thing in Revelation 13. It says here in verse 15.
The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed.
So, look at this. We take a religious freedom in this country for granted, right?
Yes.
You can believe in God. You have a freedom not to believe. So the point is, this is what's going to change. We talked about the image of the beast. That's basically a certain ideology. So if you don't subscribe to this kind of religious ideology, you're going to be killed. So people who do not, who choose not to, it's taking away the freedom. I keep recalling and reciting this passage, which is taken from Testimonies to the Church, volume 5, page 451, where Ellen White writes, back in whatever, 1890, that there will be a time when Republican Protestant Constitution of the United States will be repudiated. So this is how she called what we have here. And I can testify that this country level of freedom even today is unprecedented. You're not going to have it in any other country. Even like for example, like you check yourself into a hotel. Are they taking your passport, social security number information to check you in?
No.
I was so shocked. We were in Germany, and on the reception in Hamburg, they required, give me your passport, and she wrote my passport number, everything. Why do you need it? I'm staying here for one night. I mean, just this little thing like this. And I've learned, for example, again, I'm not talking about the country like Russia. You speak your mind, you're going to jail, for all kinds of reasons. I'm talking about, and forget about China, where you are being photographed and you have a rating of your behavior. And if you drop below based on this, then your facial recognition, you won't be able to get into the subway station because now you're, marked as being misbehaving, and they have enough capacity with their facial recognition software and cameras to recognize every step you go. So we have nothing like this. We still enjoy, but and that's what Ellen White says. It's Protestant Republican Constitution, and then it's going to be repudiated. So we have to realize it. It's going to be repudiated. So, and that's what it says. And, I cite Ellen White, not because I am trying to replace her, I replace Bible with her writings, but I'm just saying, hey, look at this. Those who are not going to worship the way everybody worship, they're going to be killed. So what God is doing, that's important to understand before we get to the term Armageddon, is why God is pouring his bowls of wrath. He's not trying to be vindictive upon those who do not accept him, but he is protecting his people who are under the threat of being killed. So that's God's protective actions. This is what we see. That's God's protective actions in the time of the final crisis. So by reading this, we can be rest assured that God is not going to let us down. God is going to protect. We may be scared because the threats are going to be real, but God is not going to let us down. He's going to keep us safe by, look what he's doing, talking about what's going on. Let's read Revelation 16:3.
The second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it turned into blood like that of a dead person, and every living thing in the sea died. The third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood.
Aha! Water becoming blood. What does it remind you of?
The first plague of Egypt.
Exactly. The same way, God is saving his people back then from the Pharaoh, and the same thing is happening. So this is why we have the language. I mean, all of this, how it's going to be, we don't know. But the language here is to show that, remember how it came to 200 years of oppression, slavery, and then every male child is to be killed, and then God steps in. So this is going to be very similar. There will be a crisis, there will be a very testing time, but in the moment of the utmost danger, God is going to come out, and that's what the promise is.
Amen.
That's what the promise is. And so let's get to Armageddon, because this is the sixth plague. And so this is what is described. Let's read Revelation 16:12 through 16.
The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. Then I saw three impure spirits that looked like frogs. They came out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. They are demonic spirits that perform signs, and they go out to kings of the whole world, to gather them for the battle on the great day of God Almighty.
Yeah, so let's stop for a second. So what we see, Euphrates is the river that flowed through Babylon. Mm-hmm. And Babylon was also oppressor. This is how when the Medo-Persian Empire dried out, the King Cyrus dried out the riverbed of Babylon, they could take the city. So that's the hint. And now in verse 13, we see all these deceptive spirits coming out of the mouth of dragon, and dragon is who? Satan. Then the beast. So we have here what is remained of papacy, the Catholic power. And then the false prophet. That's the modern Christianity, the Christian nationalism or new apostolic movement. And so these are, as you see, deceptive demonic spirit. What they're trying to do, they're gathering all the people to fight. Okay? Against whom do you think they're going to be fighting?
God.
Yeah. So, do you think you can really fight against God?
No.
I mean, you can try. I don't know how that'll pan out for you.
Yeah, that's very important. So in the moment of the crisis, these satanic deceptive agencies are trying to deceive people into going to fight against God himself and his people, which is just a ridiculous thought, but people are so deceived they're going to do for whatever, they're just, this is the problem. But look at this. Now read verse 15.
Look, I come like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and remains clothed, so as not to go naked and be shamefully exposed.
Yeah. So usually like, why is he saying this? Keep your clothes and don't be shamefully exposed. What does it have to do?
Keep your belief and don't, succumb to the
deception. Keep the truth.
Here's this thing. First of all, I come like a thief. Do you expect the thief to come?
No.
You don't, you go to Rome, and there are pickpockets. And the key is never keep your stuff in your back pocket, because you will never know when your wallet is going to be gone. There are so many cases in Rome. I mean, in Paris, this is what happened to my friend. Same. We walked on a Paris metro, and suddenly he felt his wallet with passport, credit cards was gone. He turns around, looks. So, thankfully, he sees a garbage can, and his wallet lays on the top. So everything, passport, credit card, driver license, there. Cash, gone. $1,500.
Wow.
Never seen it coming.
Yep.
But here is another thing. So you never see, in other words, the way how God responds, you never expect this to happen. And so they say, watch your clothes. Think about this. I don't know if you ever been into boxing, but I tell you what happened to one match that I was part of. We are in the team, and so the opposing team, they had this big, strong guy, and it wasn't my weight, but my friend was supposed to go against him. So this guy was, because he was tall and strong, he was boasting like, back then we didn't know who Goliath was, but he was boasting, and he was really intimidating, and he was like proud, because it was already half final. We had several, matches, and he was winning every single. So my friend was afraid to stand up against him. So he goes into the ring, and the other guy comes in, and the referee says, box! And what happens? His trunks rip off and fall. Everybody was laughing. The guy was just humiliated terribly. This happens. I don't know other cases, but this is exactly what happened. You're thinking you're strong. God is not. In other words, here they're about to fight with God. You're not a match to me, God says. For pity's sakes, I'm not going to take you serious. Just be watchful. You're going to lose. Instead of trying to even make one hit against me, you're going to lose your own clothes and expose yourself. You're going to put yourself to shame. That's the outcome of this battle. So there was no battle. And so then in verse 15 it says, and he, God, gathered them to the place called in Hebrew Armageddon. So to make the long story short, the Armageddon consists of two words here. The Megiddo, that's the valley, and then there was this somebody by the name Hadad Rimon. That was a Canaanite deity. And so there was this quote-unquote festival of wailing. They had, it's very typical in pagan religion to have this kind of day of wailing. And I'm using the word wailing, not mourning. Like there is like a wailing of Tammuz, where there's all this myth about Tammuz losing his son. That's connected with the season. When the winter starts, the son of Tammuz dies, and so everybody is wailing, crying. So people get wild. They cut themselves, they bring themselves pain, and it's just horrible. But they're trying to do this. When you look at the book of Revelation, chapter 1, this is what happens right before the coming of Jesus. Take a look. Revelation chapter 1, verse 7.
Look, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, and all peoples on earth will mourn because of him.
Yeah.
So shall it be it.
Yeah. See, somebody will be very happy to see Jesus. Somebody will wail because they'll see they're completely, they have no chance. They have no cards to play. So what Armageddon is the place of this wailing or mourning. So instead of what happens in this last, it's a sixth plague, what happens is this deceptive powers of Satan try to make the people of the earth to fight against God and his people. But God will put them to shame. And when they see that they're just simply humiliated, there's nothing else but to wail. And that's the place. So God is bringing them to the place where they just, it's not just mourning when somebody's dead. It's just you crying because you're powerless. It's like you crying like a toddler who is angry but powerless to do anything. And that's the state of the godless people who are trying to fight.
I see. And with that wraps up this lesson 13. Now, to the viewers watching at home, you might feel discouraged with all the deception that is going on, but remember that God will never abandon his people, and he has a plan for each and every one of us. So fix your eyes upon the Lord. Stay true to his word. Do not fall for the lies. Do not fall for the deception that Satan has brought upon this earth. Thank you all for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. And that ends it for this quarterly.